This is the face of Fanny Kaplan, the woman who shot none other than Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Soviet Union. In this new episode of Military History, we'll tell you all about the woman who buried her bullets forever in the body of the leader of the Bolshevik movement. Fanny Kaplan, nicknamed Fanny, was born on February 10, 1890, in what was then the Russian Empire. Little is known about her early life, except that she belonged to a large Jewish family that owned a farm in the west of the country. To financially support her 7 siblings and parents, she migrated at an early age to the populous city of Odessa, where she worked making hats. This trip would completely change her life. At that time, Russia was going through a time of great social upheaval. The regime of Tsar Nicholas II was on the brink. There was very little support from the citizens, who suffered constant and terrible famines, in addition to the abuses of the landowners. Any demonstration demanding improved living conditions was brutally repressed, with the police and army allowed to shoot and kill workers. This led to the outbreak of the First Russian Revolution in 1905. The violence continued for 2 more years, with massive strikes, army and navy mutinies, and thousands of deaths. It was during this time that ideologies such as socialism and anarchism began to take root among the Russian people. Fanny Kaplan, at just 15 years old, became involved in one of these organizations, called the Socialist Revolutionary Party. Believing that only through violence could workers achieve better living conditions, in 1906, she volunteered to carry out an attack. Her target? The governor of the city of Kiev. Unfortunately for her, the bomb she intended to use to kill him exploded while she was still in her possession. Although she only suffered minor injuries, she was discovered by the authorities.
Kaplan was captured following a bomb that she made with her partner, exploding accidentally, and she was then accused of plotting to carry out the assassination, and because of this was sentenced to life imprisonment in a hard labour prison camp, and she was transferred to Siberia, which was one of the toughest places to be held due to the weather conditions.
These places had appalling living conditions. Food and drink were scarce, the lack of hygiene allowed epidemic diseases to spread freely, and beatings by guards were common. Due to these terrible factors, Fanny Kaplan began to suffer from migraines and even periods of blindness, which left her without vision for weeks. Despite these difficulties, she continued her political education, becoming a pure socialist. As her captivity continued, the social scene in Russia grew increasingly turbulent. The Tsar lost what remained of his authority after his poor performance during World War I. This was the moment when many citizens of the nation decided they had had enough. On March 8, 1917, massive protests broke out between workers and security forces. As the days passed, several groups of police and gendarmes joined the protesters. Stripped of any power, Nicholas II abdicated the throne, ending centuries of monarchical rule in Russia. The February Revolution, so named because it occurred in that month according to the calendar used there, had been successful. Kaplan, now 19, was one of the many people granted political amnesty following this victory. Filled with fervor, she lent her support to the provisional government, which included the Socialist Revolutionary Party. However, problems soon arose. The situation in Russia remained catastrophic, with famine killing tens of thousands of people. As if that weren't enough, the country's new leaders had no intention of withdrawing from the Great War, something that did not sit well with both the civilian and military populations. Added to this was the reappearance of a controversial figure who fanned the flames of discontent, Vladimir Lenin.
Lenin was somebody who was well known within Russia, seen as an extremely dangerous revolutionary, but at the time the authorities, the new authorities, the provisional government felt that the spirit of new Russia, the spirit of democracy, required that they allow Lenin back into Russia.
Lenin had been exiled in the late 19th century after being convicted of sedition without trial. From Western Europe, he founded and led the Bolshevik Party, which espoused more extreme ideas than the nation's other leftist organizations. In 1917, with the Tsar deposed and the Russian government in friendlier hands, he was allowed to return to his homeland. However, from the outset, Lenin denounced the policies of the new leaders, calling them traitors to socialism. Based on their vision of withdrawing Russia from the war to bring peace to the population, the Bolsheviks began to gain popular support, even as the provisional government lost it. Finally, on November 7, 1917, Lenin's forces seized power after a demonstration in which almost no blood was shed. Following the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks declared the formation of a new government, which they called the Council of People's Commissars. Fanny Kaplan distrusted Lenin's policies, viewing him as an authoritarian despot. And she was not alone. In the Constituent Assembly vote in January 1918, the Socialist Revolutionary Party, SR, was the most popular among citizens. The Bolsheviks, on the other hand, received only a quarter of the vote. Not content with this result, Lenin declared the vote counter-revolutionary and dissolved the assembly. Now, power was solely in his hands. As the months passed, every party that protested against the government was banned. In August 1918, it was the turn of the SRs, who had been allies of the Bolsheviks. Lenin argued that he could not afford internal enemies. Since the October Revolution, those loyal to the Tsar had continued to seek to restore the monarchical regime, supported by most of the European powers. However, for many, these arguments were not enough. They believed Lenin had simply become another tyrant who must be eliminated. Fanny Kaplan was one of them. Thus, at just 20 years old, she decided that Russia's leader was a traitor to the revolution and therefore deserved death. On August 30, 1918, the Bolshevik leader gave a speech at a factory south of Moscow. As he was leaving and heading toward his vehicle, Kaplan appeared from the crowd and called out to him. As Lenin turned around, he shot him 3 times with a revolver. 2 bullets hit their mark. One entered his neck and pierced his lung, while the other lodged in his shoulder. The head of state was quickly taken to his quarters, where medical assistance was summoned. Lenin, fearing that someone would want to finish the job, refused to go to a hospital. After the Bolshevik leader was removed from the scene of the attack, the story becomes confusing and full of contradictions. A Russian commissar stated that he was a few meters from Lenin when the events occurred, and that upon arriving, he detained a suspicious-looking woman. However, another officer said he only arrested Kaplan after she was identified as the attacker by some children who followed her as she tried to flee. What is beyond dispute is that the would-be assassin was imprisoned and subjected to interrogation. There, any doubt about her guilt completely evaporated. Kaplan, proud of her actions, confessed her guilt in the assassination attempt, reiterating on several occasions that she acted alone. She stated that Lenin's increasing authoritarianism led her to plot his death, specifically citing the dissolution of the Constitutional Assembly. She also made clear her loyalty to the Socialist Revolutionary Party and accused the Bolshevik leader of treason for having banned it. However, when asked how he obtained the revolver, he refused to answer.
My name is Fanny Kaplan. Today I shot Lenin. I did it on my own. I will not say from whom I obtained my revolver. I will give no details. I had resolved to kill Lenin long ago. I consider him a traitor to the revolution. I was exiled to EXECUTl for participating in an assassination attempt against a Tsarist official in Kiev. I spent 11 years at hard labour. After the revolution, I was freed. I favour the Constituent Assembly and am still for it.
The interrogation continued for several days, but when it became clear that Kaplan would not hand over any accomplices, her fate was decided. On September 3, 1918, she was taken to the Alexandra Gardens in Moscow. She was forced to her knees and mercilessly shot in the head, ending her life. But her end had not yet come. After her murder, her body was placed in a barrel, doused with gasoline, and set on fire so that no trace of her body would remain. The order for her execution came from Yakov Sverdlov, a high-ranking politician within the Bolshevik Party. 2 months earlier, he himself had ordered the death of the former Tsar and his entire family, who had been held in the country since the February Revolution. The matter could have ended there, with a woman dissatisfied with her country's government taking matters into her own hands and acting entirely on her own. However, over the years, many facts came to light that cast doubt on the official version. Some argue that the assassination attempt was part of a conspiracy by the Social Revolutionary Party to eliminate key Bolshevik figures and thus return to power. The leader of the Cheka, the Russian secret police, had been executed just 2 weeks earlier in a similar situation. While there were no concrete links between the two attacks, many believe this evidence is sufficient to prove the existence of a secret plot. Sverdlov was one of those who supported this theory.
Eventually, a military commander would protect himself and would turn to state's evidence against her. He would claim that Fanny Kaplan was a member of the Socialist Revolutionaries, that this was a plot conspired by them to kill Lenin. He would also say that Kaplan was said to have been the best person to carry out the attack, as she would attract the least suspicion in the crowd.
Another branch of detractors maintained the opposite. Fanny Kaplan was actually innocent. Their arguments were based on the fact that years of imprisonment before the February Revolution had left the woman almost blind, which meant she could not have shot Lenin so accurately. It was also mentioned that there was no witness who could confirm that Kaplan was responsible. Even the Russian leader's driver, who was at his side when the shooting occurred, mentioned that a woman had been responsible, but did not confirm that it was her. The authorities simply arrested a suspicious-looking person and, to save face, incriminated her and her entire party before rushing to execute her. Some even speak of a plot within the Bolshevik Party itself, carried out to get rid of Lenin. For those who support this theory, certain officers close to the leader took advantage of the chaos in Russia during those years to try to gain more power within Bolshevism.
Todo esto sucedió durante la llamada Crisis de Agosto, cuando la cúpula bolchevique fue atacada. Obviamente muchos vieron en esta crisis la oportunidad de quitarse de en medio a Lenin, fuera como fuera, y creo que uno de los que tenían más peso fue Yakov Sverdlov.
Yakov Sverdlov, despite the lack of evidence, blamed the entire Socialist Revolutionary Party for the assassination attempt. This led to a call to fight the enemies of the revolution in the following months. Approximately 800 people belonging to this organization and others opposed to the Bolshevik regime were executed, many without trial. The truth about what happened may never be known. Evidence that could prove their guilt, participation, or innocence was lost over the years. The only thing known for certain is that Vladimir Lenin survived the assassination attempt. But despite the failure of the attempt, the Bolshevik leader was never the same. Doctors were unable to remove the bullets from his body, and his health deteriorated rapidly in the following years. Finally, after a long period of agony, Vladimir Lenin died on January 21, 1924. Many believe that the shots fired that day were truly responsible for his death. If so, the attack would have been more successful than expected, killing the Bolshevik leader in a slow fire. After Lenin's death, an incident raised doubts about the story of his attempted assassination. When an autopsy was performed on his body, the bullets were finally removed. However, one of them, the one lodged in his neck, was peculiar. It did not belong to the weapon supposedly used by Fanny Kaplan. We've reached the end of this video and we want to ask you, what do you think is the true story behind this assassination attempt? Leave your answer in the comments box below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history.